Episode 9. Sir Simon's Secret. When Virginia did not come down for tea 10 minutes later, Mrs. Otis sent one of the servants to look for her. But the servant could not find Virginia. At first, Mrs. Otis was not worried.
Virginia?
But when it got dark,
Virginia!
she became afraid. The family looked all over the house and garden, but they did not find Virginia. Mr. Otis, Washington, and the young Duke took their horses and rode around for hours. They looked in the village and in the fields, and they asked at the station, but they did not find Virginia. They returned to the house and ate dinner. No one spoke during the meal. They all thought about Virginia. Then, at midnight, just as the clock struck for the 12th time, there was a crash of thunder. The family heard strange music and ran into the hall. Just then, the wall at the top of the stairs opened up, and out stepped Virginia. Her face was white, and there was a small box in her hands.
"Where were you?"
asked Mr. Otis.
"I was with the ghost,"
said Virginia.
"He gave me this box of beautiful jewels."
"Oh, my dear, we were all so worried,"
cried Mrs. Otis.
"You must come with me,"
said Virginia.
"I have something to show you."
The family and the Duke followed Virginia through the wall, along a secret corridor, and into a small room. There was a large metal ring on the wall with chains hanging from it. On the other end of the chains was a skeleton.
"This is Sir Simon,"
said Virginia.
"He was a bad man, but in the end he was very sorry. His wife's brothers kept him here until he died."
There was an old jug and plate on the floor. Virginia pointed to them.
"Look how his hand is reaching out for food and water,"
she said.
"The jug and plate were too far away for him to reach."
Now the jug was empty, and there was only a pile of dust on the plate. Virginia fell to her knees beside the skeleton, and the rest of the family looked at the terrible sight in front of them.
"Now we know the ghost's secret,"
said Mr. Otis.
"What a terrible story."
"His sadness is over,"
said Virginia.
"Now he can sleep."
"You are an angel,"
said the Duke. And he took Virginia's hand and kissed it. Episode 10. A funeral and a wedding. Four days later, there was a funeral at Canterville Chase. The funeral started at 11 o'clock at night. Beautiful black horses pulled black funeral carriages. Inside one of the carriages was a black coffin with a purple cloth on top of it. The servants walked beside the carriages with lighted torches. It was an amazing sight. Lord Canterville travelled from Wales for the funeral. He sat in the first carriage with Virginia. Mr. and Mrs. Otis were in the next carriage, and Washington and the twins were behind them in the third carriage. Mrs. Umney was in the last carriage. She had spent 50 years in the house with the ghost, and he had frightened her many times. She wanted to be there to say goodbye to him. They buried Sir Simon in the churchyard. Virginia put some flowers on his grave, and her eyes filled with tears.
Goodbye, Sir Simon,
she said. The next morning, before Lord Canterville left Canterville Chase, Mr. Otis asked him to take the jewels.
The jewels belong to your family,
he said.
They are worth a lot of money, so you must take them. However, Virginia wants to keep the box. Can I give it to her?
Lord Canterville smiled and shook his head.
The jewels are Virginia's,
he said.
Sir Simon wanted her to have them, and she must keep them. After all, we don't want the ghost to come back.
So Virginia kept the jewels and wore them when she married the Duke of Cheshire a few years later. She became the Duchess of Cheshire, and she was very happy. The Duke and the Duchess loved each other very much. After their honeymoon, they travelled to Canterville Chase to visit Virginia's parents. They stopped at the churchyard on the way, and Virginia put fresh flowers on Sir Simon's grave.
What happened when you were with the ghost?
Asked the Duke.
I can't tell you, my dear Cecil.
Said Virginia.
Please don't ask me.
The Duke smiled.
You can keep your secret,
he said,
as long as I have your love.
You always have my love, Cecil,
said Virginia.
Good,
said Cecil.
Then perhaps one day you can tell your secret to our children.
Virginia smiled and took the Duke's hand. They walked happily towards Canterville Chase.